So it's with great pleasure that we're welcoming JP from Celestial. Now, for anyone that's not familiar, and obviously we see what you do there today. Celestial is one of the leading companies working in this outdoor drone space and involved in events such as Secret Garden Party, the Eurovision Song Contest. So, well, first of all, JP, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Just so everyone can get to know you a little bit more, could you just talk about your entry into live events and how you kind of found yourself in the world of drones?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thank you for bringing me here. Incredibly big boots and seats to fill after Stewfish. But yeah, so I've always been into live events since a very early age. I was captivated specifically by lighting. I ended up in sort of national, regional theatres. I then ended up very fortunately to get a job with Production Resource Group, PRG, in the UK. Very quickly ended up working on some of the largest projects in the world, specifically for lighting, working again on some of Stu's projects, so huge admiration for that. I then made a switch from working as a technician with PRG to getting into the design side of things. So I set up my own design agency, ended up in the concert touring world, touring extensively around the world for 10 years as a lighting and production designer. In the middle of the pandemic, a chance meet, as we were all sort of out of work, I met with two founders in 20 minutes from my house, who were setting up the formation of a drone display company. They had a requirement for a production designer, specifically with lighting experience. One of our founders is a lighting designer as well, who toured for many years with Primal Scream, so it was sort of a match made in heaven. And yeah, very quickly we went from 100 drones to nearly 2,000, and we went from 3 to nearly 50 people in 3 territories. So it's been a rapid growth within the industry. And now I am in-house head of production and production designer, working on all of the large projects that we work on.
So on that topic of large projects, what are some of the events you've worked on in the last year or so?
Yeah, so I mean, some of our most known work is London New Year's Eve, Eurovision, the Secret Garden Party that we showed a bit of a trailer to there, which was the first integration of a drone show with a music festival, which is something which is very challenging to do, but that was the first full integration with a fireworks, audio, visual, and the drones being close enough to the audience that it feels like there is a direct connection, a direct link to that, which we can come on to later. And then we worked on a very large project in Australia, which was the first body of work I did for Celestial, which was called Sky Song, which was, we penned it as the first feature-length drone show in the world. It was a 60-minute show, and to go alongside the drones, we had 100-meter hologores outdoors, one of the largest Showtex products that's ever been used outdoors. So we had this mixture of outdoor projection and drones, telling an Aboriginal story in Australia.
So in terms of like drone technology, obviously I think there's no one doesn't know what a drone is. But like, what do you find are the biggest misconceptions with what Celestial do and how you use drones?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception on drones kind of overall is sort of how they can be used and how much narrative you can tell with them. We steer away from being what we call clip art in the sky, so just taking a logo and just throwing it up in the sky. It does serve a purpose, and it's a purpose, but it's not something we feel has too much value to it. All of our stories are narrative driven, so we have a start and an end point and a message that we want to communicate. Sometimes that's with a visual image which really communicates, or sometimes that's a lot of kind of abstract work. And alongside all of our shows, we will always have a bespoke soundtrack, bespoke narration, and we're collaborating with original artists. It's not just simply taking a logo or an image and replicating that in drones and throwing that up in the air. So it's we work very differently. We're more of a studio, and all of our process is akin to a film curation of a film or a short story, rather than just simply logo or imagery in the sky.
So could you maybe talk through that workflow? So when a customer comes to you saying, I've got this idea, I want to kind of add this to my show, like how do you then take it in-house and go from sketching an idea to actually creating it?
Yeah, it's like I say, it's very similar to a sort of commissioning a short film. Really, it's that initial what is the narrative and the message you want to get across? Is this is this a large brand that want to get across their core key values of their product or their brand or business identity, or is this an artist that wants to really communicate the kind of message of their music? So we will sit down with them, get across those key messages. We then put that into a script. So we will work with some of the best script writers in the world, produce a 10-minute script for the show. That script will then be fleshed out and taken to our animation department, who will create storyboards. All those storyboards will be approved and signed off by the client. And then that goes into the animation process, where we start with 2D, 3D, and then we start putting the building blocks of the show together. We have very comprehensive pre-visualization within the animation software, but then also now within Depends, Synchronon Depends. We have that functionality in-house. So we can very accurately model in 2D, 3D, and also in VR what these shows will look like. We could check sight lines. We can put the exact location this show is happening within the 3D. And then from there, we're very uniquely positioned that we are based in the UK, and we're one of the only drone operators that have a full-time operational airfield. So we will then test our shows in person, where the client can either attend in person or via video link, watch the show in live, full scale.
So you mentioned Depends there, and that's obviously a software that many show designers, lighting designers are very familiar with.
Yeah.
When you kind of bring in a lighting designer to the prospect show, do you find they can get a bit more involved? Because you see a drone show, it's almost like this otherworldly thing that no one kind of understands, but are they able to kind of really enjoy it, can be part of the dialogue because it's a software that they're aware of? And
absolutely. Yeah, we the core team around Celestial, we all from the events industry ourselves, so we know how to integrate with broadcast, how to integrate on large scale live events, large ceremonies. Again, how to work with lighting designers, what their requirements are. We can take, in a lighting example, we could take the exact color palettes from the lighting console to color match in the sky in real time if we need to. So yeah, we have all that technology built in-house. And yeah, it's just by employing the right people with the right experience. That's how we succeed, especially in a broadcast environment. And an event such as London New Year's, it has no value if it doesn't work at New Year's at 23:59. It has to happen. So yeah.
And just on that note as well, when you're talking about bringing people into this side of the industry, I had this conversation we've had previously, but who are you looking for when you're kind of growing the Celestial team? Are you looking for drone pilots, or are you actually looking for people from the creative industry?
Yeah, it's one of our biggest learnings as a company was in the early days we were looking for drone experience, and the fundamental shift was that isn't wrong as such, but the direction we're traveling is that it's employees from the creative industry. Flying a drone swarm is more akin to running a lighting console or an audio console. It has no real bearing on the hobby drone market or the prosumer drone market. It is very different. You're more actually akin to flying a small plane. It's a very challenging space that is rapidly growing, and is still very, very young.
Yeah.
we're 3 years old. I think that probably the whole industry is maybe 6 to 7 years old. You know, so it's still very early days.
The hardware you're using, are there kind of any elements of, like, you might see, you know, an MA lighting desk or an AV lights desk? Is there anything, those kind of bits of technology involved in the show itself, or using some other kind of software or hardware?
Yeah, so all of the drone flight software is proprietary.
Right,
So it's
okay.
all proprietary specifically for flying drone swarms. So it has no bearing on, you know, if you bought a DJI drone, it is very different.
Right.
So it's all proprietary flight software. Like I say, we most of the core key team at Celestial know event technology, so we know how to link MIDI, timecode, Grand MA consoles, any other consoles can be linked in to that. So we you know, for some of the events, we'll have a master timecode, which is triggering an MA3, an audio, a QLab session to do video screens, but then also into our flight software. So that's how we get the real precision. Going back to the London New Year's example, you know, it has to, if you're doing the countdown, it has to be precisely synced.
Sure.
And some of the challenges, just to expand on that, some of the challenges you have with that with drones, where we have to factor in that if the wind increases, the drones take slightly longer to get into position. So we're dynamically adjusting the time it takes for them to get into position. So we have the launch sequence, which will encompass the time it takes for the drones to get up into position, to expand, to begin in darkness, the first animation, and then that has to be precisely synced for the first light in queue to happen. So it's pretty challenging.
I mean, just on that note of being challenging, like, so even if you can maybe use some of the examples you've already mentioned, in terms of getting a drone show up in the air, could you maybe just kind of tell us about the various regulations, especially in, like, for instance, in the UK, you have to go through to actually get a show signed off by the authorities?
Yeah, it's a bit of a minefield, but it's a minefield for a good reason. We're to operate drone swarms. You have to be set up essentially the same as a small airline.
Right.
So if you really look into it, we are, on some league tables, we are the biggest airline in the UK because we have nearly 2,000 aircraft registered. And when they're in flight, they are the same as when another aircraft, a 737, is up in flight. So it's a lot of regulatory code that we have to follow. We have a big operating case that we have to follow. We have a very akin to fireworks. We have to have a sterile area, so similar to a fireworks fallout zone. We have a distance between the drones where it has to be completely sterile, just as a safety zone. Now, because we're so early in drone technology, that is reducing as year and year goes on, and more safety case comes in, that we can prove that we operate in the most safe manner as any other companies around the world. So even in our time of operating, we've gone from 120 meter sterile area with now half of that, and it's still getting smaller each time.
Okay. And in terms of just how you operate as a business, is that almost like a separate division of the company that is just dealing with that, or are you all very well versed in the legal?
Yeah, we all have to be aware of the challenges around operating a drone swarm, all the way from the sales pinch. So all of our sales team can immediately flag if somebody comes to us and says we want to fly drone swarm above a major landmark. It very quickly, not just a major landmark. Let's do another example. Within a large stadium, that's one of the challenges which no one has really been able to crack yet because of the sterile area. The main piece of regulatory is that we cannot overfly an audience. No operator can do that anywhere at this moment. You cannot fly over the audience. So our sales team know what to look for, but then all the way through the process, everyone keeps the boundaries we have to follow in mind. Like I say, we're always pushing them and working around them, and it actually comes to our advantage sometimes. The Eurovision project, for example, had been to a couple of other suppliers, who were simply unable to find a takeoff site. They just couldn't find a location, you know. So we needed to deploy nearly 600 drones for this project. Each one of those has to be laid out on a takeoff grid. And yeah, other suppliers were unable to find where to position this behind the major landmark. Now, using some of the event technologies and the kind of rapid deployment of staging, we essentially staged over an entire memorial garden, which was a big, it had nearly a 9-meter elevation drop, so it was immediately ruled out by a few people. But yeah, so a large infrastructure project, but we have all that in-house, and we were able to kind of level out this space, cover over a lot of obstacles, kind of move obstacles, and yeah, we managed to deploy in a very, very urban space within a city, which, you know, on paper you would say is not possible. Yeah. But so actually that's part of where drone swarms are at the minute. It's really exciting to try and find these challenges and how do we make this work and how do we fly in these incredible environments. I think very early in the stages of drone swarms, they were sort of very not integrated in the rest of a production. They were sort of so far away from anything that it wasn't. There was no real connection. But like I said, from the example from Secret Garden Party, which is a festival in the UK, we were able to get the drones nearly 60 meters from the audience. And when that space invader came up out of darkness, it was a huge emotional reaction. You know, it was on top of you, and the clientele at that festival really.
Well, yeah, you can hear it.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you must have just from that show alone, but you know, the Eurovision as well. You must have like so many, you know, show designers now. You know, for the longest time, it's like, here's my stage, and then sure, at a big festival, you might also have a firework display that kind of extends out. But all of a sudden, your canvas is infinite, right?
Yeah, that's the magic of it. You know, I know it's a cliche, but literally, if you dream it, we can fly it. You know, fireworks, I think the only narrative thing you could really do in fireworks would be a heart shape or a star shape. You know, which is great, and you know, but with drones, you could tell such a more powerful message. You know, you could tell a whole story. Like I say, the integration of all the technologies is really where I feel passionate, and I think that's where it's really going to go. It's not possible in the UK yet, but we're starting to see pyro on drones as well, so it's sort of things are progressing in that respect. And again, working together with all the collective audiovisual departments is really where it's going to be really exciting where it goes next.
It's interesting you mentioned that, actually, because I remember there's just in our day-to-day at TPI speaking to special effects rental houses. Obviously, they have a laser division, they have a pyro division, and I remember for many years there's like this umming and ahhing. It's like, oh, we're going to need like a drone division as well. From your, obviously, you know, developing this kind of side of the industry, could that be a thing? Could this be an extra element for a special effects company, or does it probably have to be a specialist company working on the drone side of things? Do you know what I mean? Could it?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think really where the regulations are at the minute, I think you would always need to come to a company like ourselves, because then we can hold you through the process from start to finish, and we deal with all of the tricky kind of legislation and the permissions required. We do all that in-house. In terms of the management of the drones themselves, you know, it's just very akin to a servicing of a moving light, really. You know, it's a similar process you go through with the pre-flight checks and the storage. So that side would be possible, but I think, you know, overall, we would rather work with those companies as a partnership, which is something we've done many times, and just hold their hand all the way through the process of integrating together. And that's again with technology manufacturers themselves. You know, we've been approached by a number of kind of well-known technology companies to put hardware onto drones or to you know to integrate in that way. So that's the way I think it will go at the moment.
Okay. Now, I feel that your point you mentioned earlier about flying over audiences might already kind of answer this question a little bit, but everything we talk about now is outdoor environments. Are we going to see a swarm show indoors in an arena? Is that something that's potentially in the future, or is it something that you professionally think is going to be an outdoor?
Yeah, I mean, we get asked a lot this question about indoor drone shows. I personally, from my background of kind of arena touring and stadium touring, I would love to see it. Simply where we are at the moment, the technology isn't quite there. The main thing being that we rely on GPS and RTK GPS, which is denied in an indoor. You couldn't rely on it. Now, there are other technologies out there to make this achievable, indoor drone shows, but they're not quite there yet. And yeah, I would say watch this space, because it's something which I think when it does happen, it will happen in a very different way than the options that are out there at the moment. The indoor drone product would be a smaller product, and then you would be able to overfly the audience. I would say watch this space.
And kind of on that note, just kind of looking for, it's still such a new world in terms of these productions and shows. But from your perspective, what are the technological innovations you want to maybe see in this world, or maybe that are coming down the pipe that you think are going to kind of take what you do to the next level?
Yeah, I think the main thing, the really obvious thing, is sort of show length. There's been a bit of misconception from a bit of backstory, is that battery life is what hampers all drone companies. So at the minute you're looking around 10 to 12 minutes of battery life. Now we have a way around that, so you don't just have to have a 12-minute show. We can do a seamless handoff between drones. So you could send up a swarm of 200, and then seamlessly we send up another 200 and just leapfrog that way. So that's how we do a longer format show. But the biggest technology advancement that's going to come across the board in a couple of years' time, battery technology is going to dramatically change. The makeup of the chemicals within the battery is going to change, and it won't be out of the question that a 30-minute battery or even longer will be on the market. And that's the same for your phone as well. By 2027, 28, the battery technology in cars, phones, drones is going to dramatically change. So that's the biggest thing. There's more sort of refinements in the software and how we deploy. That's we're always working on. But fundamentally, we're using a very rigid technology already. GPS and RTK has been around for decades, and it's very, very robust. But yeah, I would say battery technology is going to be the biggest change.
Okay. And as a
just to expand on that, I've just a thought. What that would open up is if you had a brand, for example, that wanted to really make a statement in a centralized location. You could put an advertising campaign up for half an hour, of a large scale drone, 600 to 1,000 drones, for half an hour in a very urban place is huge marketing value. So I think that's where that will come into. Like I said, the longer format thing we've already solved, because we could do an indefinite show at the minute, really. We could just keep chucking drones up like a yo-yo, and you wouldn't notice the change.
Wow. Okay.
Exciting.
And in terms of like when you're, talking about like new technologies, I guess even new drones coming in, is a bit strange. Obviously, you're working on shows, but having to constantly see how the market's developing, because it feels like there's obviously new products coming out all the time. Like, how are you kind of striking that balance within Celestial?
Yeah. We have our core product at the minute. We have a core piece of hardware, which is it's the most widely used piece of hardware. It's a Uvify IFO we use currently. They're here today doing demos. So we use that platform now. We are locked at that platform, but like I say, they're making enhancements. We're making enhancements all the time.
Okay. And just one more question before we kind of throw it out to the audience as well. In terms of the biggest show you guys have done, how many drones are we talking? How many drones are up in the air at that one time for the biggest drone show at the moment?
Yeah, so the UK record is around 650 drones at once. There's a bit of a shift in the industry. You look into other territories, sort of. You can find the videos online of 10,000 drones going up, but actually there is little to no regulation in some circumstances. in the US, you're around the 1500 mark. The UK, you're around the sort of 650. We have the capability to fly, up to 2000, but it's just a use case. It's and the challenges of kind of where you want to deploy and what are the reasons for using many drones. I think sometimes it's not just a resolution battle. It's not just how many drones we can throw at it just to get the biggest number, which a lot of clients come to us, I want 2,000 drones, I need 10,000, I need the world record, what is the reason for doing that? I would rather have a longer show with more thinking behind it. It'd be incredible. It's incredible to see what you could do with even 50 drones. Which you'd laugh at now. Some of our clients, but sort of the average of what we do is around the 4 to 650 mark for a single image. But like I say, we're sort of pioneers of the longer format drone shows.
Amazing. Just while we open it up to the audience, there is actually a few more bits of footage of just so we can see some of these drone shows we're talking about. But does anyone have any questions in terms of the world of drones? Oh, go ahead.
When you go to a show, you don't only watch, you hear as well. My question is, for example, if you have fireworks, you see them and you hear the sound already. Is there any interactivity between the drones and the surround sound show? In order that you get a directive sound from the drones, you could imagine that they start talking to the people one day. Or
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's like we really believe in that interactivity between the two mediums. One thing we did experiment was putting a live microphone on some of the drones to capture that kind of visceral sound of the motors. Another interesting audio thing that you get is if you imagine, this is very unique to drones, if you imagine we do a giant bird in the sky and that bird is flapping its wings, you not just see the visual, you hear the noise of all the motors, kind of a very, very unique noise, but then you will actually feel the wind of, we've got nearly, say 2,000 propellers at full chat, blowing the wind, so the audience will feel that gust of breeze over you. So it's a real unique, and now we're able to bring drones closer to audiences. It's a really unique, really unique feel. And we're really playing with that at the minute with some of our shows.
I suppose it must be a real advantage about having your airfield as well, that you constantly get to experiment with this.
Yeah, that's a unique thing. Like I said, we have a very secluded area. We own a large airfield where we can deploy at any time. We can test things. The public don't need to see, and they won't see it. But we can also experiment with all these kind of new technologies and new tricks and ideas.
A question I should have asked actually as well, in terms of the LED element of the drones as well, can you maybe go into a bit more detail on like what, in terms of the lighting element of the drone, what's being used on your kind of like main fleet?
Yeah, so it's RGBW at the minute. That is one other technology that will be increasing its resolution, its brightness. We're sort of at the sweet spot of brightness, but I think color fidelity, similar to early LED moving lights, for example, that it worked very well on RGB, but you lost the sort of pastel colors. So that is something which will be improved on, absolutely. So you can get really nice kind of pastels and limes and things like that. So it's essentially the whole body of the drone itself is luminescent. So it'll glow from the bottom, but it also then the light transfers throughout the plastic, so the whole of the internal body glows.
Any more questions from the audience? No? Yeah, go ahead.
I think like any bit of technology, there are limits. We have rain. Rain isn't really an issue. Our platforms are IP rated. All of our hardware and our piloting equipment is all IP rated. I think that the biggest thing, the biggest challenge is wind. We have a very high wind speed tolerance, so just under 30 kilometers an hour. I would say that what we try and say to clients is that we will still be able to operate probably when most of your audience is starting to leave or trying to put on a coat or an umbrella. So we've never had to cancel a show because of that. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, just over there.
What's the highest dB volume when you flew out those 650 drones?
The audio volume.
Yeah.
It's a very high frequency, so it's not very loud, but it's a very sort of high frequency. It's probably around 80 decibels, something like from where the audience are. You can hear it, but it's not. If you have a PA, you won't hear it at all. So we can, for the Secret Garden Party, that music festival, we were able to deploy in complete darkness. The audience were not aware that the drones were in the sky. So when they appear, it's a huge moment. But yeah, it's a very low dB.
Okay. Great. Well, JP, thank you very much for being here. Now,
Thank you
obviously at
very much.
ISC as well, they're doing a bit of a push forward. Drones, it's actually a whole
Yep.
kind of a drone hall now as well.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
you're going to go up.
Yeah, we're going to have a look.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for JP.
Cheers. Thank you very much.